Welcome to the WWE Podcast, your number one source for the latest in WWE news and straightforward analysis. Are you ready to get this thing going?
Give me a hell yeah! I said give me a hell yeah!
Then let's get this show started right now.
All right, everybody, guys and girls, welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown Review here on the WWE Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Ritter. You can find me on Twitter at Michael5Ritter. And today we're going to be talking about SmackDown that aired on January 29th, 2021. This was obviously the go-home show for the Royal Rumble pay-per-view that's going to be happening this Sunday. So normally, as you guys are well aware of, the go-home shows like to, feature a lot of action, some juicy things to get you excited for the pay-per-view. And they certainly tried to do that with the main event. We will certainly get there during the SmackDown review, obviously. But, if you guys watch SmackDown, you know that match itself, the main event, took up probably about 40 minutes, give or take, a pretty big chunk of the actual show. In my notes, I actually chart down the segments, whether they're backstage segments, actual matches, whatever you want to call it. And there's actually only about 5 this week. And on a normal week, it's usually 8 or 9. I've even had like 10 or 11 sometimes. Just depends on how it goes. But that will be the SmackDown review whenever we get there. Just wanted to kind of give you guys a general outlook that the show itself, it didn't really feature a lot of different things, but there was certainly a lot of action as far as the main event goes. It started off as a one-on-one match, turned into a 6-man tag match, which turned into a 10-man tag match. We will definitely get there, but once again, guys, welcome to the SmackDown review. First-time listeners, thanks for choosing to listen to us today. I certainly appreciate that. Regular listeners, thanks again for making this a part of your weekly routine. I certainly appreciate it every week, and I will try not to disappoint you and give you some good content today for you to listen to. This is a bit of a, I don't want to say jam-packed show because it's not, but compared to a normal week, there's definitely more stuff to cover. Obviously, we will start with the SmackDown review, which is why most of you are here. And then, of course, I will give my Royal Rumble predictions after that. And then for those of you who are interested, you can stick around for some bonus content at the end. I will be giving my top 5 Royal Rumble winners as well as a couple honorable mentions. So that's what we have in store for today. But as always, we will start with the SmackDown review, and we will get that going right now. And this week actually started with Daniel Bryan in the ring. As SmackDown started, as it went on the air, his music was playing and he was already in the ring. So that's basically how we were introduced to SmackDown tonight by Daniel Bryan. And he starts it with the typical Royal Rumble hype promo, and he also acknowledges that he doesn't have many opportunities left to win the Royal Rumble. And for some reason, he actually thanks the Alpha Academy for getting him loose and prepared for the Royal Rumble. I didn't really understand that, but he kind of stops there because AJ Styles, yes, Raw's AJ Styles actually interrupts him. And, you guys know how I feel about this stuff right here. I certainly wasn't happy, but I don't know if it was just me, being off my game or maybe just slacking a little bit, but I actually didn't realize it until he was almost to the ring. I was kind of, AJ Styles interrupted him. Nice, that's kind of cool. And then, wait, what is it? He's from Raw. What is he doing on SmackDown? It took a little bit for it to click in my mind that he's actually a Raw guy on SmackDown. But once it did click, I was very disappointed. And Amos, whatever you want to call it, I've heard him called so many different things. But anyways, he actually uses the quote-unquote quarter invitational excuse, which has been tossed around several times in the past. I really am not a fan of this thing at all. It definitely kind of throws a wrench in the whole brand split legitimacy. And just, it's WWE breaking their rules, but we've kind of, been down this road before. And I'll get to it a little bit more later because AJ Styles is certainly not the only Raw superstar who makes an appearance tonight. But when AJ actually starts his promo, he questions if Daniel Bryan has one foot out the door and if he's back to being a quote-unquote general manager because of the way he's been dressed recently, pointing out that he's been rarely in any ring gear, and he's basically been dressing kind of fancy in street clothes, at least as of lately, and I've kind of noticed that too. But after that, Daniel Bryan challenges AJ to a match. AJ accepts and shoves him down, but as Daniel Bryan was getting up to retaliate, Amo stood in his way, blocking him, and obviously nobody's going to go through him. So Daniel Bryan tells AJ that if he's a real man, he'll come to the ring tonight by himself. And before AJ could leave, Daniel Bryan made sure to make it clear that if he doesn't come to the ring by himself, that with or without Amos, he's still going to kick his ass. So Daniel Bryan is not playing around right now. My thoughts about this is basically, this was a good segment despite the stupid cross-branded quarter invitational nonsense. I didn't really say anything because I didn't want to jinx it, but I was actually kind of proud of WWE for sticking to their rules for the most part since Survivor Series ended. They really, other than the women's champions, they haven't really done any of the cross-branded stuff, so I was happy to see that. But, like I said way back on a previous episode, until they're on the road again, touring, and actually have separate rosters, which they do normally do whenever things are normal and not, with how things are with COVID, obviously, and they're not traveling. But it's so easy whenever they're all in Tampa or Orlando, wherever they are. It's so easy for them to mix up the roster. So I try to keep that in mind, especially as the night went on, because like I just said, more Raw superstars showed up. But I did like the intensity of Daniel Bryan here and the clarification that he is all in for his current stint in WWE. So that definitely makes him, at least as we currently sit right now, that makes him, just as big of a threat as anybody else in the Royal Rumble. A Daniel Bryan who's all in and who's being hyped up and booked the way he has in recent weeks, you'd be crazy not to take him serious in this match, and I certainly am expecting him to, have a pretty big say-so in who wins the match. Will he be my prediction? You're going to have to stick around to see that, but that's basically one of the guys who I am certainly going to be keeping an eye on because he has a legitimate shot to win the whole thing. But moving on here, we will be backstage, actually. Kayla Braxton, she has an interview with Bayley, and she begins to question Bayley about her loss to Bianca in the obstacle course last week. But Bayley interrupts her and wants to skip to the part where Bianca was left beaten in the ring at the hands of Bayley. And Bayley says that she is the biggest problem that Bianca will ever have, and she adds that Bianca isn't winning the Royal Rumble this weekend, and she's certainly not winning tonight. So after she loses, she can go climb in the darkest. She made sure to emphasize the EST there. I like that from Bayley. She can go climb in the darkest hole that she can find, and that just leads up to which is right up next. That is the singles match with Bayley and Bianca Belair. And I've actually been waiting for this matchup to happen, and I don't know, if it was advertised previously, I didn't catch it. I actually don't follow WWE on social media just strictly for spoilers. Sometimes I don't watch wrestling, whether it's Raw, SmackDown, whatever, live. Lately, obviously, I've been watching SmackDown pretty live since I've been doing the podcast, but for the past few years, it's not guaranteed. Obviously, it's DVR'd every week, so for the longest time, I was tired of getting spoilers from WWE whenever Raw, I'd start Raw an hour and a half late and have a little bit of fast forward time during the commercial breaks. And I would already know what happens later whenever, something big happens and you're spoiled. That really sucks. I'm sure, more, some of you guys can relate to that. I'm sure it's happened to you guys as well. So that is one thing that I didn't, if it was advertised, I didn't get to catch this match. So I was actually surprised whenever I saw this happen. But there is some legitimate bad blood between these two women. It started almost immediately after Bayley and Sasha's feud ended. And about that, just a little side note here, I actually love the long-term build that we're seeing in the women's division on SmackDown. You've seen Sasha transition to Carmella and Bayley obviously transition to Bianca. And to see them still in those respective programs as we sit here tonight is, it's pretty nice to see. I feel like all four women in some way are benefiting from this, whether it's Carmella kind of establishing her character or Bianca getting more credible by, beating Bayley. I don't want to, give away the winner of this match. Obviously, I'm covering it right now, but and Bayley just being relevant and that heel in the role in the program with her and Bianca. So if you want to nitpick, I'm sure you could find things wrong with this, but if you just look at the big picture, all 4 women on SmackDown, who I feel like are kind of the focus of SmackDown, those 4 at least, and I just think that those 4 are certainly benefiting from all that. But like I said, that was just a side note. I don't want to get too off topic here. As far as the match goes, it was pretty hard hitting. There were some solid shots landed by both women. Bianca gets the clean win after successfully hitting the KOD, which is obviously the kiss of death, on Bayley. And Bianca actually looked pretty good in this match. I mean, so did Bayley, but just the physicality. Bayley was bringing it, and Bianca was not backing down. There were some shots where I was certainly wondering if Bianca actually connected on Bayley, and certainly the other way around as well. I know that Bayley hit a pretty vicious knee and an elbow drop off the top rope to Bianca's back, and she was kind of swirling her hair around, which Bianca, I know someone, I'm not sure who mentioned it. It might have been on this podcast. It might have been somewhere else. But they mentioned how Bianca doesn't use her hair as a weapon anymore, and that was kind of like a staple of her character. It was unique, and it was just, obviously a weapon. I'm not sure if you can even disqualify her for using that, because, it's part of her body technically, so that's definitely, a whole topic for a different day. But Bayley was using her hair, kind of twirling it around, just playing with it, and Bianca did not take that very lightly. It actually kind of pissed her off. She told her not to be messing with her hair. I'm sure some of you guys heard that as well. But let's see here. After she wins the match, because she does, like I said, by hitting the KOD, Kayla Braxton comes out to interview her on the ramp. She couldn't even get backstage. She was interviewed at the top of the ramp on the stage, and she kind of gets emotional, talking about this being the biggest win of her career, and she even shows respect to Bayley's previous record-setting title run and why that makes this win mean that much more to her. And she says that after picking up the biggest win of her career, the only thing that would cap off this week is to win the Royal Rumble. And I could not have said it any better myself, because, I totally agree. I think that is exactly what needs to happen to cap off this week for Bianca Belair. You guys all know how I feel about her in the Royal Rumble, so we'll get there in the predictions a little bit later. Moving on here, we got Corbin versus Dominic Mysterio with Rey Mysterio on commentary. And Dominic gives Corbin a little bit of a taste of his own medicine by attacking him from behind as he was making his entrance. And then, with those hits that he landed, he already surpassed the success that he had in their last match. I think it might have been last week, where he didn't even land a single punch, it seemed like. So that was definitely a pretty rough showing for Dominic. I remember thinking to myself, man, that's a pretty bad one. It might have actually been his worst one yet in the WWE. But, you can't really, expect too much from Dominic. I don't want to be too hard on him. Whenever he's obviously involved in that whole Buddy Murphy stuff, I don't want to, dig into that again, but I'm just saying, whenever he's involved in that kind of stuff, then yeah, it's totally acceptable to nitpick and go on rants and complain about how he's being used. But if he is trying to obviously be a professional wrestler, with him getting squashed by legitimate professional wrestlers like Baron Corbin, who are just way bigger than him, it's realistic. And that's one thing I noticed about Dominic in this match too, is whenever it comes to him, getting the edge or taking control of a match, however you want to, look at it, he never really does it, clean or like legitimate. It's usually always like a mistake by the heel or whoever he's wrestling against, trying to be cocky or taunting a little bit. I know it actually happened a couple times here in this match tonight with Baron Corbin. He went flying into the ring post. It's just a small thing in his character that I've kind of been noticing, that they're not making it seem like he's getting the upper hand legitimately on all these professional wrestlers, that he's actually, he's falling into some luck. That's usually what it is. He lucks his way into taking control of matches, or at least getting the upper hand momentarily before it eventually obviously gets taken, which is definitely what happens here, because Corbin picks up right where he left off and starts to punish Dominic. But Dominic does regain control, like I said, whenever he sends Corbin into the corner post. But Dominic has a failed 619 attempt, and it was only a matter of time before Corbin hit the end of days to pick up the win. And then Corbin tries to cheap shot Rey Mysterio as Rey was going to check on Dominic. And Ray ends up sending him into the corner post again and then puts him on his back, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But whatever. I mean, I'm not putting too much thought into this. This is basically just one of those feuds that is probably going to stay on SmackDown. The furthest it might get is maybe on a kickoff show at a, maybe like a Fastlane pay-per-view, not a big pay-per-view. So I don't expect this to go necessarily anywhere too far. So there's really not a whole lot to dig into there. But next, however, we're going to be backstage for a little bit here. I think they stay for a few segments. Up first here, we get the segment with Big E and Sonya Deville. And Big E hands her a $1 bill in an attempt to try to get her to tell him his Royal Rumble entry number. But lo and behold, Miz and Morrison decide to show up and literally kill the mood, at least for myself. I was kind of wondering what was going to happen there because I do not think Adam Pearce actually made an appearance on the show at all. So I thought that might have been Sonya's time to kind of, take control and show the type of authority figure. I mean, I say that loosely. I don't know exactly what she is, but basically to show the type she's going to be. I wasn't sure if maybe they were going to use that right there to maybe say, hey, she could have shown if she was, leaning more towards being a heel by saying, yeah, I'm going to tell you your number. It's number 4, just an early number. Or maybe, help him out, give him the other way, give him a high 20s number or something like that. Or maybe just, kind of tell him, hey, I can't do that right now. Obviously, Adam Pearce isn't here. That's probably something I need to talk to him about if I'm going to be telling people. Or she just legitimately might not know. I know that some years they used to have it where wrestlers would find out the day of the Rumble what number they were going to be, or at least, obviously, storyline-wise. So that was definitely something that I was hoping would get talked about a little bit. But like I just said, Miz and Morrison come up. And then Miz threatens to cash in his contract in the Last Man Standing match this weekend, which is one direction that I really haven't even thought about them or considered them taking. And, it would definitely cause quite a discussion here on this podcast. But that's something that I really don't even want to speak into existence. But, it's technically possible. So, it's definitely something to think about. But here in this specific interview, push does come to shove very quickly whenever Morrison tries to cheap shot Big E. And then they try to get a quick 2-on-1 advantage backstage, but they fail, as you would expect. And Big E nearly takes care of both of them by himself before multiple officials come to split them up. And that's pretty much all we do, or all we get there. We go to a commercial break, come back, and things continue backstage as Reginald approaches Sasha. And as you know, Reginald is Carmella's whatever. I still can't pronounce that word. I haven't really even tried. I know you guys are probably thinking it's crazy that I haven't even tried, but whatever. He approaches Sasha to give her a gift for her championship match this weekend at the Royal Rumble. He gives her a bottle of champagne to drink after she loses her SmackDown Women's Championship to Carmella, and she obviously declines, and we move on. We didn't even see Carmella here tonight. I'm not even sure if she made an appearance interview-wise. I do not think she did, so they are definitely going to save that. And I don't want to sound too crazy. Clearly here in this segment, they mentioned that they have a match this Sunday. And as far as I knew that they did. But as I was looking at the match cards, or at least, the single match card, but I looked at several links because none of them were actually the same. And they weren't posted, of course, obviously they were posted at different times. Like some were posted 2 days ago, some were posted 3 days ago, some were posted yesterday. And they were all kind of different. That's why I really wasn't sure. The only things that were really different, obviously some had the same, main staple 4 matches that were happening. But for instance, the Matt Riddle and Bobby Lashley match and the Sasha and Carmella match, those 2 were kind of floated around on both cards. They weren't mentioned on all of them. But I'm pretty sure that the Women's Championship matches definitely happened this weekend. So I'm going to keep doing this. And whenever I made my predictions, whenever I wrote them down before I recorded this, I did make the predictions for both those matches, so I'm just going to assume that they are both happening here. But like I said, we really don't get much here. Sasha just kind of declines. Obviously she's not going to accept it. She compliments Reginald's French accent, which I really didn't know that he had an accent. He really hasn't gotten much mic time. So tonight we were introduced that he does have an accent, so you could take that for whatever. But keeping things backstage here, Sami Zayn actually approaches Shinsuke Nakamura as he's walking. I don't know. He's in his ring gear. I wasn't sure. He does get involved later in the main event, but he wasn't listed to have a match. So I guess he is just assuming that he knows things are going to get physical tonight, I guess you can say. But anyway, Sami Zayn approaches him and he questions him if he thinks that it's suspicious that all the Raw guys are suddenly here, and that, Sami Zayn, is a conspiracy that I will get behind with you, because I totally agree that it is pretty weird that the Raw guys decided to show up, but obviously you guys know why. I already alluded to it earlier, and I'm probably going to talk about it a little bit later once that main event does happen, so we will get there whenever that time comes. But right here with Sami Zayn and Shinsuke, Sami says that he knows that Shinsuke and Cesaro are both doing their own thing right now, which is great, but he brings up whenever he used to be their liberator, and he asks for Shinsuke to repay the favor and help him get his Intercontinental Championship back. And Sami tells Shinsuke it's no coincidence that all the great things he's accomplished here in WWE have all been associated with him. Like, he brings up Shinsuke's debut match at NXT and Shinsuke's most recent reign as the Intercontinental Champion. He's basically just taking credit for all of Shinsuke's WWE success. Shinsuke takes note of that and says that he appreciates Sami for everything, but go to hell, and he walks off. I love that from Shinsuke. But we do get a little bit of a sharp left turn here, because we finally, and like I said, this was an hour into the show, and we didn't even get a mention at all of Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman, Kevin Owens, anything like that. They did finally show the video package of previous weeks. Going back all the way to the Steel Cage, they were just showing the whole video package of this. But I was actually surprised that to start the second hour of SmackDown is whenever they actually got into the Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens stuff, and they had a virtual interview, and that's all it was. It was the virtual interview. It was, a pretty good segment. I mean, it was definitely a good segment. The interview itself was awesome, but I mean, I was expecting something to happen later, especially if they were both in the building, or in the same building, because Kevin Owens does say that, this Sunday at the Royal Rumble, they won't be in separate rooms. They'll be together, obviously, face-to-face. So Roman Reigns should obviously watch what he says. This was clearly the best part of SmackDown, in my opinion. I definitely wanted to provide some audio for this, but the video itself, or the segment, I guess, the interview, was actually like almost 8 minutes long. I mean, it was a pretty long promo, especially for them just to be talking. And I didn't want the episode to only be, a 8-minute video of something that you guys saw on SmackDown. But for those of you that have not seen that segment, that backstage interview or virtual interview, whatever it is, I would most definitely do what you can to watch that before the pay-per-view this Sunday, just strictly because there were some things. I mean, it was probably scripted for the most part, or at least, the usual pinpoints or things that they were told to address. But I mean, if you listen to Roman Reigns, the things he says and the way Kevin Owens was reacting, this was certainly a personal promo from both of them. I mean, it was great. Like I said, I really, really wanted to provide the audio because I cannot do it justice. I know Kevin Owens says that he thinks that as far as he's concerned, he's already beaten Roman Reigns twice, and that the last man standing rules are going to play in his advantage because nothing is going to be able to keep him down this Sunday. But things just get so much more intense whenever Roman Reigns starts to talk, because he actually questions Kevin Owens. Like, he brings up his parents and his grandparents that Kevin Owens alluded to last week, and Kevin Owens warns him, you should watch where you're going there. It's a pretty sensitive subject. You should watch what you say. He warns him multiple times. That does not stop Roman Reigns, though. He actually continues, and he mentions his grandparents, and he says that if Kevin Owens is a fool, then his dad must have been a fool because he did not teach him his limitations, and that he is going to basically beat the absolute hell out of Kevin Owens, and someday he will be able to be reunited with his grandparents. I mean, he was taking all the shots. He was not holding anything back. It was getting very personal. The interview ended whenever Roman Reigns got his remote and pointed it at the screen and just kind of turned it off. That was pretty cool. I don't think I've ever seen that in one of these virtual interviews. And Kevin Owens just loses his mind. I mean, if you've ever been in an argument with somebody and gotten hung up on, you probably know exactly how Kevin Owens felt. Like if you've been hung up on like while you're in the middle of a rant and the phone just ends, oh, that's just the absolute worst. And you could tell that's kind of what happened to Kevin Owens. He gets pissed. He rips his earpiece out. He rips his mic off. He kind of just throws it. And that's just, I mean, like I said, if you have not seen that yet, if you didn't somehow manage to watch SmackDown and you do get a little bit of time, I would go to YouTube, see if it's there, and definitely watch that. Like I said, it's about 7 minutes long. I mean, it's pretty long for just a virtual interview on SmackDown. So, especially whenever it's strictly talking and they're not face to face or nothing like that, you're just basically watching like a Skype or something. So, but that is definitely, a pretty good, or one of the better parts of SmackDown. It didn't develop anything as far as the storyline itself goes. It just kind of made it a little bit more personal. So for those of you who are excited for the Last Man Standing match, you are probably going to be a lot more excited because this is just, I mean, the two guys work great together, Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns. Kevin Owens has a point whenever he says that Roman Reigns has not beaten him clean or by himself in this entire feud. I do expect that trend to continue. I mean, it's the Last Man Standing match. I would bet anything that Jey Uso gets involved, which is all right. I mean, that's what he's there for, so that I have no problem with that whatsoever. So Kevin Owens might as well just prepare to fight multiple people. He basically called his own number by saying that the Last Man Standing rules are going to benefit him and be in his advantage because it is going to take basically killing him to keep him down. So that's a match. As far as the singles matches go, or the matches before the actual Royal Rumble matches go, the Last Man Standing match is definitely the one I am most looking forward to. So moving on here, we get the much awaited, like I said, it's the second hour of Raw just started, or of SmackDown, sorry, I hate when I do that. The second hour of SmackDown just started whenever we started the Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens virtual interview, and right after that interview's over, it's already the main event, or at least what was supposed to be the one-on-one singles match with Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles. And so I certainly, that's the main reason why I expected something else to happen with Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens later on that night. It's the go-home show. I expected them beating the hell out of each other to be how SmackDown went off the air. That obviously was not the case. But because this match started so early, I expected more to happen. But we will get in right now to exactly why that was not the case. So, like I said, it was originally scheduled Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles, and Cesaro was actually a guest on commentary. That's how it started. And AJ does come out by himself, so the whole, basically Daniel Bryan challenging him, saying that he, doesn't need to bring Amos out there with him to have a one-on-one match. He actually accepts that challenge, so that was nice. And, with how these three have been booked or featured in recent weeks, it's easy to think that Daniel Bryan, Cesaro, and AJ Styles are all favorites to last pretty long in the Royal Rumble, if not win the whole thing. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. Cesaro gets some more mic time here throughout the beginning of this match. But Sami Zayn comes out with his documentary crew to cause a distraction, and he stays outside the ring holding up signs and continuing his protest during live action. He claims that the WWE tried to keep him off TV tonight, but he will not be silenced. In terms of the actual scheduled match, this was an elite matchup that's WrestleMania worthy, and it doesn't even get to have a true finish because of outside interference. Big E actually comes out as well, and he attacks Sami Zayn and eventually comes face to face and gets dropped by Cesaro. Moments later, Sami Zayn caused the actual interference to stop the match, and that just basically started an all-out brawl. Shinsuke Nakamura comes out to even the numbers and makes it an official 6-man tag team match. And for those of you who didn't catch all the names, it ended up being Cesaro, AJ, and Sammy versus Big E, Daniel Bryan, and Shinsuke. But we didn't even get to see that match have a real finish because Miz and Morrison come out to cause yet another DQ, and all hell breaks loose once again. Otis comes out to get a little bit of revenge next on the Miz and Morrison whenever he comes out and hits his signature Caterpillar elbow drop. And then SmackDown went to commercial break. Whenever we come back, we end up getting a 10-man tag team match after Sheamus decides to join the party. And this match was just a complete cluster and extremely hard to keep track of, but Sheamus does end up hitting the Brogue Kick on Sami Zayn to get the win and finally end this match. But the chaos doesn't stop there because Miz and Morrison continue their weird trend of attacking people whenever they attack Sheamus. But we get the biggest surprise of the night next whenever Braun Strowman makes his return and completely cleans the house. And whoever pointed out on the mailbag episode this week about Braun Strowman looking ripped, you were completely right. He is absolutely shredded. Definitely not somebody that I would want to run into in the Royal Rumble match. I actually remember, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, I know I've brought up that I was at the 2017 Royal Rumble, and that might have been Braun Strowman's first one that he actually participated in, and I remember whenever Baron Corbin eliminated him just clean by himself, and the crowd actually went crazy for Baron Corbin, and at that moment right there, I thought that was going to be a huge, I'm trying to think of the word, springboard, I guess is the word I'm looking for to Baron Corbin to maybe skyrocket him a little bit. That obviously was not the case, but just in Royal Rumble season, I always think about that whenever Braun Strowman gets involved. But my thoughts here on this match first off, it was wild. I mean, it started off as one-on-one, and I expected a pure classic match between a Raw wrestler and a SmackDown wrestler, but that's the furthest thing from what we got. We ended up having 7 wrestlers come out and get involved, including the guy who was guest on commentary. And Corey Graves said, multiply this by 3, and that's what you can expect this Sunday at the Royal Rumble. So the Absolute Chaos was simply a preview of what to expect with multiple wrestlers from both shows going against each other. However, I do feel like they could have saved all of this cross-branded stuff for Sunday. I mean, literally 2 days you could have waited and made the most out of the draft they did back in October, and it would have made all the interactions at the Royal Rumble mean a little bit more. So now, I mean, we're going to see it, but, we just got it 2 days ago on SmackDown, so, what's the big deal? But, like I said, not going to get too far into that, even though I kind of have already, but whatever. The Braun Strowman thing, I feel like his return was also kind of wasted, or at least not maximized. That would have been a pretty exciting entrant in the Royal Rumble. But after Braun Strowman, because, he's obviously going to be in the Royal Rumble. He hasn't necessarily, quote-unquote, officially declared. But, by my count, with Braun Strowman, that is 20 men officially declared. So that leaves 10, quote-unquote, surprise entrants. But I would limit your expectations there. You can probably expect like 6 or 7 of them to be, just regular guys on the roster who haven't been announced yet. And a few of them, are probably going to be legitimate surprises, whether they're legends, NXT guys, people who are returning, new signings. You never know. This is actually a Royal Rumble that I'm pretty excited for, and I haven't necessarily been this. Cause I'm excited every year for the Royal Rumble, but this excited, and it probably does correlate a little bit with having this SmackDown review, so it does make me a lot more invested. But nonetheless, I'm just excited for how many people I feel like have a legit shot this year. I don't feel like it's just a shoe-in who's going to win. I feel like there's like 4 or 5 men, 4 or 5 women who have a legit shot to win this. So I'm definitely going to be paying close attention this Sunday. It's definitely one of, like I said at the beginning of the show, like you guys have heard everybody say, like you guys probably feel yourself, the Royal Rumble is one of the best pay-per-views of the year. Just the match itself, it's the one match of the year that's going to keep you excited, keep your eyes glued to the TV for that long. Sometimes a match can catch your attention like that to where you're just completely locked in. But the Royal Rumble, it's just so easy. Even if you stop paying attention, as soon as you hear that countdown, you're looking right at the TV again. So it's just definitely something to look forward to this weekend. It's the best pay-per-view of the year, so, definitely enjoy it. And one other thing before I close out the SmackDown review portion of the episode, I wanted to mention that Roman Reigns actually said to somebody, I'm not sure if it was on social media or where I saw it exactly, but Roman Reigns is definitely going to be getting a new theme song here pretty soon. So for those of you that like that type of stuff, you will probably be satisfied there. I guess from what he said, they're putting a lot of work into it, putting a lot of thought into it, so it's not something that they're just rushing or doing just simply to do. I think they are trying to get it right, so I will definitely appreciate that. And I'm not necessarily in any rush either, so whenever it does happen, I will be perfectly fine with it, but I just wanted to spread that word for those of you who didn't happen to hear that. But that is the SmackDown review portion, and next we will get to my predictions for the 2021 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. All right, it is prediction time for the Royal Rumble card. like I like to do here before every pay-per-view that comes up, I like to give my predictions. Sometimes I'm completely wrong, and when that happens, I hope that you guys don't listen to this, but whenever I'm right, I hope you guys do listen to, so whatever. Take that for what it's worth, but let's see here. I'm going to start off with the possible, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm not 100% sure if this match is going to happen on the pay-per-view or if it's going to be on Raw, whatever, but for now, I'm just under the assumption that it is going to happen at the pay-per-view, and that is Matt Riddle versus Bobby Lashley for the Intercontinental Championship. And obviously that is going to be Bobby Lashley. I know Matt Riddle obviously got a win against Bobby Lashley on Raw not too long ago. He went through the gauntlet, only to be cheap-shotted by Bobby Lashley last week on Raw. But I just don't think, it all boils down to Matt Riddle is simply not I don't want to say he's not a worthy opponent because he is, but he's certainly not ready to hold the United States Championship. I don't think that he is the guy to take it off Bobby Lashley. I don't think Bobby Lashley necessarily is going to lose it anytime soon anyway, even though he is in the Royal Rumble, and that's a name nobody's really thrown out that's going to win it. It's probably because he already has a championship as we speak, so that could be a reason why. But as far as the Matt Riddle versus Bobby Lashley Intercontinental Championship match, whenever it does happen, my pick is Lashley. Moving on to the tag team match with Charlotte and Asuka versus Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler for the Women's Tag Team Championships. I do expect this to be a title change. I think that it will go back to Nia and Shayna, maybe just to free up the Raw Women's Championship this close to WrestleMania. You can't just have the Raw Women's Champion being stuck in a tag team, being wasted every week. So I fully expect, it was just 2 years ago, I believe, maybe it was the Royal Rumble whenever... I'm trying to think, actually. I don't want to spew out wrong information, but I do think that maybe Asuka lost at the Royal Rumble a couple years ago, but that could be wrong. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the time where she lost her championship, and actually I might be thinking about the time it was to Charlotte, and Charlotte ended up going to be in the main event of WrestleMania with Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch, as you guys all know. So I could be thinking about something completely wrong, but nonetheless, the point still remains that the Raw Women's Championship is currently just being tied up in the tag team picture, which doesn't make any sense. So, the tag team championships aren't really taken very serious anyway in the women's division. So you might as well put them back on Nia and Shayna so Asuka and Charlotte can both move on to bigger and better things. Moving on to the SmackDown Women's Championship match with Sasha and Carmella. I do expect Sasha to win it. It's kind of the same thing with the Bobby Lashley and Matt Riddle thing. I just simply don't think Carmella is ready for the championship to be back around her waist. I know she has had the championship before, but in this new character, I don't think it'll do her any good having those expectations as being the champion. I think her character still needs to develop a little bit. She can maybe put on a few more good matches with Sasha or, Bayley or whoever she ends up feuding with next. And I doubt it's going to be Bayley, but whoever she ends up feuding with next, you can expect her to maybe be a better version of herself after having this long feud with Sasha. So she just needs, I think, to take it kind of slow. She does have a bright future. She's going to be the champion again at some point, but I don't think that's going to happen yet. Up next, we get a little bit more into the juicier matchups. Drew versus Goldberg for the WWE Championship. And I'm sure you guys are all really... I'm sure those of you that know my background, some of you probably expect me to pick Goldberg. And that's kind of where I'm leaning, just strictly because, the stat came out last week, or on Raw, I think they announced it, that Goldberg has beaten every single champion that he's come back to face, whether it's Brock Lesnar, Kevin Owens, The Fiend, whoever it is. Goldberg has been successful. And like I said, whenever I was on the weekend review with Matt a few weeks ago, I just don't think that they brought him back for nothing. This could be setting up for Drew to do something else, maybe even come over to SmackDown and do something with Roman Reigns. I'm not exactly sure. That's a little bit too far down the road as of right now. But, man, I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to predict Drew McIntyre to lose his WWE Championship to Goldberg at the 2021 Royal Rumble. But moving on, we will move to the Universal Championship in the Last Man Standing match with Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens. I feel like this has a good chance, not including the Royal Rumbles, but just out of the other matches, it has a good chance to be match of the night, obviously. I don't think that Kevin Owens is going to win. I do predict Roman Reigns to win, but I do think, like I said, it's going to be match of the night. It's probably going to be like 30 minutes long. I can't remember if it was a last man standing or an Iron Man match with Triple H versus Shawn Michaels, and that was also at the Royal Rumble. So this kind of just reminds me of that as one of those matches leading up. I hope that all these championship matches happen before the Royal Rumbles. The Royal Rumble matches should always be last, although now that I think about it, I think for as long as they've had these 2 Royal Rumbles on the same night with the men and the women, I do think they start the show with one and end the show with another. That's probably what they're going to do. I mean, it's smart to do it that way, but I think it happened, I know for sure it's happened at least one time that they ended the night with a championship match and not the Royal Rumble. I don't care if it's the men's, the women's, whoever it is, they just have to end the pay-per-view with a Royal Rumble. So speaking of the Royal Rumble, we will move there and we will start with the women. And I jumped on this bandwagon back in October. One of my first predictions since I started this show, or since I started doing the SmackDown review, was Bianca Belair. She is going to win. Whenever I first did it, I literally called it the way early prediction of Bianca Belair winning the Royal Rumble. And I feel like all signs are still pointing there. If she were to win and I hopped off this bandwagon after jumping on in October, I would feel like an absolute idiot. So I'm going to ride till the wheels fall off here, and I am going to stay with Bianca Belair as my pick. And I don't do that very easily. I know that there are a lot of women who are worthy of winning this. I know people have mentioned Alexa Bliss lately. Shayna Baszler, this could be exactly what she needs. Charlotte can go back to back after they, possibly lose those tag team championships earlier in the night. We'll see how that plays out. But nonetheless, I am rolling with Bianca Belair, hoping that they put the jetpack on her. Let's ride. Let's get her going, push her, and let's see where she ends up. I mean, I'm not saying, obviously, you have to just put all your eggs in the basket, give it to her right now. But just make the decision that you're going to roll with her and, give her this serious push and see what she can do. Because obviously inside the ring, she's great. She can obviously work on a few other things with her character, with, her mic skills, things like that. But she's still pretty new at this. So I'm not really judging her too hard at that. She has the things that it's really, really hard to teach. So that's something that I will bank on. And let's hope I'm right here. I would love to see Bianca win and go on to challenge Sasha or whoever at WrestleMania. But that leaves us with one last match, the Men's Royal Rumble match. And this is actually the hardest one. I'm going to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure. The name I'm going to say is who I think obviously is worthy of winning it and who I think certainly can win it. I mean, I just mentioned him back in that main event as somebody who's probably going to have a pretty long run, if not win the whole thing, and that is AJ Styles. I think that he is certainly worthy of it. He's legit with almost at his side. I do think that adds to his character. I mean, it does. It's certain. I mean, if anytime you have somebody on your side in your corner, you have that advantage. Whenever they happen to be 7 foot tall, I mean, you can imagine the advantage is going to grow a little bit. So, AJ Styles, that's who my pick is. Although, as soon as Edge came out on Monday and said that, basically put his focus on the championship instead of Randy Orton or any specific person, he basically said that he wants to come back and win the WWE championship. So that's a name that I'm certainly paying attention to as well as Big E. I don't think Keith Lee is going to win it just yet. Daniel Bryan, certainly, I expect him to be there at the very end. Final Four. If there was, I'm sure there is a gambling platform that does have wrestling. I don't live in a state where you can gamble anyway. I've already tried it, so I couldn't do it even if I wanted to, but I would put money on Daniel Bryan being in the Final Four and possibly winning it. But if I were to tell you right now, my official pick on record is going to be AJ Styles winning the Men's Royal Rumble and Bianca Belair winning the Women's. Final answer. So that is that, and those are my Royal Rumble predictions. Obviously, the first pay-per-view here in 2021, so I hope that they start off on the right foot and maybe get on a roll here with some good pay-per-views to start this year as we head into WrestleMania season full swing. But up next here, guys, we will do the top 5 Royal Rumble winners. And like I alluded to, or like I've said, basically all these other top 5s, a lot of you guys are probably going to have different lists because there were a lot of people that I wanted to put on this who I just simply couldn't for different reasons. And there are some people who some of you might disagree that they're worthy of being on it, and obviously some people who you guys might feel like should be rated a little bit higher. But that's the beauty of these lists. They always say it's not about number 1, it's about number 2 through 5, because that's where all the debate, that's where all of the conversation happens. So we will dive right into this. Like I said, it is the top 5 Royal Rumble winners of all time. All right, guys, top 5 time here, and let's get started with the honorable mentions. And I have a few here. Number 1 I want to do is Asuka, the first ever women's Royal Rumble winner. I just thought, first off, that the first ever women's Royal Rumble match where Trish Stratus came back, Lita came back, and Charlotte and Alexa Bliss were watching ringside in their little chairs or whatever as the Raw and SmackDown Women's Champion. I thought that was honestly the best Royal Rumble match that I've seen in recent memory, and I mean that 100%. I stand by that. The excitement I had, the surprise entrance, I really liked it. I enjoyed it, and I think it's kind of cool. That was the first year. I think it was the 2018 Royal Rumble, actually, that Asuka did that. So the year before that, when I went, I didn't realize it, but it was actually the last Royal Rumble where it was only the one Royal Rumble match where the women, or before the women had their own. So Asuka having it in 2018 and getting to win that first ever Royal Rumble, I thought that was pretty awesome. And just the match itself, that's one that because one of my favorite things to do is to go back and watch Royal Rumbles. And that's one that I definitely have gone back to watch again for multiple reasons. Seeing Trish Stratus in the ring for the first time as that surprise entrant, that was just the greatest thing ever. Lita, too, obviously, seeing her getting to step in the ring with Becky Lynch, who, if you are aware, Becky Lynch looked up to Lita basically like Sasha Banks looks up to Eddie Guerrero. It was just one of those things. So her actually getting to step in the ring with Lita, I thought that was pretty cool. And moving on to another honorable mention here, I don't really want to give it too much. First off, I want to say the circumstances obviously prevent me from getting too into this, but the 2004 winner, for those of you that don't know, Chris Benoit, I'm not going to put him on my list in the top 5, but I will say that if obviously the circumstances that are out of our, as wrestling fans, control, that makes us basically have to completely wipe away everything that he did prior to that in our memory, no matter how, impactful or how much we actually enjoyed it. What happened was just a complete, we don't even have to get into it. You guys all know. So that's why we don't really talk about him. But I will say that Royal Rumble, if everything was just normal and not a complete just crazy situation, that Royal Rumble would actually be number 1 on my list. Not even joking, the number 1 spot, just for so many different reasons. It was just pure right in the middle of the Ruthless Aggression era. So I feel like I would be doing a disservice to you guys if I didn't say, if you haven't seen the 2004 Royal Rumble, to go watch it, just because, it's just a thing of beauty from the Royal Rumble, and a lot of stuff happened. So another honorable mention I will say is 1998, Stone Cold Steve Austin. This was actually his second Royal Rumble victory, and he outlasted The Rock for the second year in a row, and then he went on to beat HBK at WrestleMania. Whenever Stone Cold has 3 Royal Rumble victories, you can't put all 3 on there. But this was a big one, and I certainly wanted to at least make it an honorable mention here. So moving on here, we will get to number 5, and that is HBK for the 1995 Royal Rumble. And this was actually the Royal Rumble where HBK became the first man to win from the number 1 position. But the reason why I put this at number 5 and not higher is because he actually failed to capture the championship at WrestleMania. However, he does get redemption the following year by winning the Royal Rumble match again and then beating Bret Hart for the WWF Championship. So if he would have won, obviously this being the first number one winner would have probably been way higher. And him being the number one winner, or the first winner from the number one position, gets him an automatic spot on the list. So I'll put him at number 5. If he would have won this year, I would certainly move him higher, but he didn't. So we will move on here to number 4, and this is actually Ric Flair, 1992. And in this specific, obviously, I did not watch this match, but I have gone back and looked and done a lot of research. I mean, I didn't watch it live. That's what I meant to say. I have gone back and looked and done research about it and looked up a little bit of information about this. And actually, WWE announced prior to the event that the winner would capture the WWE Championship. The following year, 1993, is actually whenever they started the rule that the winner would get a number one contendership or number one contender match at WrestleMania. So this was the last year that was not the case. So the winner of the match was Ric Flair, and he actually lasted nearly an hour exactly to win this championship. So I always thought that was pretty cool, especially considering that we just saw something like this happen not too long ago in 2016 with Roman Reigns, whenever he had to defend his championship, which I will say, I'm not a big fan of that. The Royal Rumble, as I've just said probably like 10 times, you guys are probably tired of hearing about it. It is definitely just one of the best things throughout the entire year. And what it means, the entire point of the Royal Rumble is to get a number one contendership for WrestleMania. So I was certainly, obviously I didn't listen to the podcast yet, the WWE podcast, so I certainly didn't hear about how anybody else felt about it. But that just, I hated that from the moment it was announced. I didn't enjoy watching it. Whenever Roman Reigns, started or entered number one, it made it damn near all the way to the very end before Triple H obviously eliminated him. I absolutely hated that they changed the stipulation. I just feel like it's disrespectful. The Royal Rumble should always have the same rules, and the winner should always get that number one contendership for WrestleMania. But having said that, we will move on here to number 3. And this is actually a pretty big one. I remember this very vividly. It's Rey Mysterio in 2006, whenever he entered at number 2 and he lasted an hour and 2 minutes. And that was just pretty wild to see. This is the ultimate underdog / feel-good story. And, for those of you that watch, I'm sure you remember pretty vividly that this was only a few months, I want to say, after Eddie Guerrero passed away. So Rey Mysterio certainly was paying tribute to him throughout this entire thing, or at least wearing a EG armband that he wore for a pretty long time. Actually, a lot of wrestlers did. But I personally feel like this particular 2006 Royal Rumble ended a 5-year run that was just elite of Royal Rumble matches from 2001 all the way to 2006. Some of those Royal Rumble matches that I'm referring to are going to be on this list as well. But I just feel like even the next year, whenever Undertaker won, although that one wasn't quite as great in my opinion, I just feel like this Royal Rumble itself, whenever Rey Mysterio won, I feel like that was kind of the end, in my opinion, of just a really solid run that they had with the Royal Rumbles. But I'll move on here to the number 2 Royal Rumble winner, and that is 2002, where Triple H won after he came back from his injury. I think he tore his quad, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty brutal injury. I remember pretty clearly that whenever he came back from injury, he was just a huge guy. Like, it's not like he was small before injury by any means, but just compared to how he looked whenever he came back, it was definitely a noticeable difference. And the pop he got whenever he came back. I remember watching this pay-per-view because this is one of the few ones that I actually did get to watch live, and it was my introduction to Triple H. Like, this was how the Triple H that we know. Like, this was real time, because obviously I didn't watch in the Attitude Era, but I know who Triple H was whenever he was in DX. I have seen highlights, religiously between then and now. So I know what Triple H looked like before then. And seeing him that night and hearing everybody talk, JR and everybody who I was with at the pay-per-view, like family, friends and stuff, hearing them talk, oh, Triple H is back. He's so huge. Look how different he looks. And then noticing, like, I almost said it. He did look completely different before he got injured. So he hit that rehab, and it ultimately, led him to go on a pretty huge run after that, just in his career. He did not look back. One thing I will add about this Royal Rumble that doesn't have anything to do with Triple H is Maven getting attacked by Undertaker, because he eliminates Undertaker from the Royal Rumble, and the Undertaker does not forgive him for that. He actually takes him throughout the arena and beats the living hell out of him. And one other thing about this, this Royal Rumble actually took place in the Phillips Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, so shout out to that. I love that arena. It's certainly beautiful. Been there before. And moving on here, we will cap off this list. And I'm sure some of you already know that I couldn't leave him off the list completely. He made the honorable mentions, and I've left him off a couple of these lists that maybe he arguably should have been on, but he will definitely make his way on this one, and that is number 1, Stone Cold Steve Austin in 2001. And one thing I'll add about this is just a quick little side note to this specific Royal Rumble, Kane, if you were to sit Kane down and ask him, when were you the, no pun intended, hottest in your career? When were you just at the absolute peak or arguably the best night of your career? And he might say the 2001 Royal Rumble, because that's whenever he set the then record 11 eliminations in the single match. And keep in mind that the unstoppable force who is having the ultimate night of his entire career, setting records, seemingly unstoppable, Stone Cold Steve Austin is the guy who got in that way and completely stopped that freight train. So that's one thing that makes this Royal Rumble that Royal Rumble win that much more impressive, is that it did come down to Stone Cold and that behemoth, the big red monster Kane, in the biggest night of Kane's career. And Stone Cold was still able to, come out on top. And that was just, a thing of beauty, as well as him getting his 3rd Royal Rumble victory. I mean, if you get 3, that's uncomparable. That's like ultimate. It's the wrestling equivalent almost to like what Tom Brady's done in the NFL with his championship. I just don't think in today's day and age anybody's going to get 3 Royal Rumble victories. Maybe the guys that already have 2, like Randy Orton, I think might have 2. I'm not sure about John Cena as well. I don't know 100%, but I personally don't think. I think that's a record that's probably not going to be touched anytime soon. I don't think they're going to commit to anybody like that to give them 3 Royal Rumble victories, but I don't know. We did literally just witness Roman Reigns get, 3 or 4 consecutive WrestleMania main events, and I never thought I would see anything like that. I still think that is wild that Vince McMahon actually did that, but that's not really what we're talking about here this week. We will certainly get to a top 5 that's more centered around WrestleMania at some point, but right now we focused on the Royal Rumble. So I hope you guys enjoyed that top 5. It's one that I wanted to do before the whole COVID thing happened. Now that that's over, I finally got a chance to come and give that to you, so I'm definitely glad I got to do that. Next week, I'm going to have another top 5 for you guys, the top 5 women's wrestlers of the Ruthless Aggression era, so I'm going to have a little bit of a women's-themed top 5 coming your way. And like you guys know, that's my era, so there's going to be some honorable mentions as well, because I certainly am a big fan of the women's wrestling. Let's just say that. I loved it, especially back then, whenever you had the likes of Tori Wilson, Sable, Stacy Keibler, and that's just like for the looks, say, like whenever you're a 13, 14-year-old kid. And then whenever you look to the actual wrestling side, I don't want to give away too many names, but you guys know who I'm going to say, so I'll save that a little bit more for next week whenever I get to that top 5. But that should do it pretty much for this episode, guys. I definitely appreciate you guys listening to me as always. I certainly hope that all of you guys have a fantastic weekend. I hope you guys all enjoy watching the Royal Rumble. I hope whoever you want to win wins. And then, obviously, I hope that you guys have a great week leading up to that. Next week, obviously, the SmackDown review that I'll be doing for you guys. But until then, guys, I hope that you guys all have a great week again, and I will talk to you guys next week.